All right, let's talk about how we go about drafting a body paragraph so that it has appropriate evidence and that our commentary is thorough. So I'm using the same prompts that we looked at in the past video and the same thesis statements I wrote while we were doing that. So for the first question, remember that was a synthesis one that has the multiple sources, and it was about the value of college. So I have the same thesis, that college is worth the cost, and that's what I'm going to build my body paragraph on. In writing a claim sentence, when I did my kind of outline in the last video, I talked that I was going to talk about the financial advantages of going to college. So I looked at the sources, and when it came to money, I noticed there were a couple sources that were not agreeing with one another. So I decided to use that idea of a counter argument. So my claim sentence is then a counterclaim. It says, while low wages have been cited for new graduates, ultimately, college is a fiscally wise choice. So that will be my topic sentence for this body paragraph. Then I also went through and picked out two pieces of evidence, and because I'm doing a counter argument, I wanted them to be contradictory. So this first piece of evidence is actually from source C, which is a visual source. So it's hard to kind of cite text from an image, obviously, so I kind of paraphrased the information from the chart, and it says between 2001 and 2010, the average initial hourly wage for male graduates dropped from nearly $24 an hour to $21.77. So this would argue that as of lately, the wages have dropped, and therefore it might not be worth the money to go to college. So, because I'm doing a counter argument, down here I found evidence that kind of refutes that idea. And it says, the returns for a degree have soared. 3 decades ago, full-time workers with a bachelor's degree made 40% more than those with only a high school diploma. Last year, the gap reached 83%. So this is saying that 83% of people who go to college make more than those who have a high school diploma. So this one is refuting this piece. So if you remember when we talked about the types of paragraph you can use when you're synthesizing evidence, this will be an example of a counter argument paragraph. So let's write. First and foremost, we already have our claim, which is, while low wages have been cited for new graduates, college is a fiscally wise choice. Fiscally just means money, okay? So a couple things I want to point out about this example of a counterclaim is this first half, I've presented what the opposition would say, but this, the second half, is my opinion. So when we're doing a counter argument, you want to make sure that your topic sentence is still presenting your opinion. It might acknowledge the other opinion like I've done here, but ultimately you want your paragraph to prove your point. So a counterclaim is going to be written with the other side acknowledged, but it's going to have a very clear claim that lines up with your main intention with that body paragraph. All right, so there's our claim. Now, if we're using that Toolman model we talked about in the last, in the video with these notes, the next piece is the data, so the evidence. I'm always going to start with the opposition when I'm writing a counter argument paragraph. If I start with the evidence that supports me, there's really no point in presenting opposition after that. The only way a counter argument works, put a star next to this in your notes. The only way a counter argument works is if you start with what the opposition says and then refute it with better evidence, okay? So I'm going to start with the opposition. I'll say opponents of, I'm going to rephrase that a little bit. Opponents of, I think that's an awkward wording. Let's start that over. Sometimes that happens. You just got to start the sentence over. Those who feel a college degree is not worth the cost may cite a drop in hourly wages over the last few years. So I have not presented my evidence yet, but I've kind of transitioned into it by saying this is what these people say. So then what I want to do is include my evidence. Now, because this is already paraphrased, I can put this right into my argument, but I am going to add a little bit of reword just so it kind of fits into what I already have. So those who feel a college degree is not worth the cost may cite a drop in hourly wages over the last few years. In fact, using a transition word, between, and here I'm entering my evidence, 2001 and 2010, the average initial hourly wage of male graduates dropped from nearly, and like I said, I'm just bringing exactly down what I have because it's already paraphrased, from nearly $24 an hour to $21.77. Now remember, the instructions told me that I need to cite my sources, so I'm going to put them in parentheses after. So I have one source. Now what I need to do is point out why this is an invalid opinion, or point out why the people who feel this way are wrong. So remember, my evidence points out that there's actually an 83% gap in pay between those with a college degree and those without. So looking at this hourly drop, one variable I might point out is the fact that this chart was just for college graduates. It didn't have high school graduates, those with high school diplomas. So really, we have no way of knowing if those dropped the same or if they dropped more. What happens is this piece of evidence gives us a clear increase comparison between the high school diploma and the college degree. So I'm going to try to kind of explain that situation to refute why this is inaccurate. But I'm going to do what's called the switch in my counter argument, where I turn over from the they say to what I say. So I will say, however, this drop does not account for, I'm freaking out here. Okay. For the wages of those with a high school diploma. As far as we know, that group may have experienced a similar, if not more significant, drop in hourly wages. So for what I've done here is I've kind of switched that the argument by pointing out the limitations of this particular fact, because the chart that was provided just spoke to college graduates. It didn't say if high school graduates had seen the same drop in wages, and therefore you can't really make a side-by-side comparison as to whether college is worth the cost. So now what I'm going to do is present this statistic from my second piece of evidence that proves there is a significant gap. So when considered side by side, there is in fact an 83% gap in income between high school and college graduates. And that is from source D. All right, notice that when I put in my second piece of evidence, I just didn't drop a chunk of words from the text. Instead, I've just kind of paraphrased the information by citing the specific number. All right, so now before I kind of finish up my commentary, I'm going to read what I have so far. So I started with my counterclaim. While low wages have been cited for new graduates, college is a fiscally wise choice. Those who feel a college degree is not worth the cost may cite a drop in hourly wages over the last few years. In fact, between 2001 and 2010, the average initial hourly wage of male graduates dropped from nearly $24 an hour to $21.77. However, this drop does not account for the wages of those with a high school diploma. As far as we know, that group may have experienced a similar, if not more significant drop in hourly wages. When considered side by side, there is in fact an 83% gap in income between high school and college graduates. Therefore, it pays off to attend college because you'll ultimately make more money than someone who does not attend college. This makes tuition worth the investment. All right, so there's kind of my commentary. It's kind of a quick commentary at the end there, but it does do a couple things. I summarized why does this evidence matter, so I explained that you're ultimately going to make more, which is proven by this 83% gap. And then I also, in this last sentence here, connected back to my thesis, which is that college is worth the money. So this is my overall argument. I want to point out a couple things to you before we move on. Like I said, this first sentence, that's my claim. In this case, I'm using a counterclaim. And then for evidence, I'm going to cite source C. And I also cite source D. Where does it start? All right. And then all of this stuff around that, like when I talk about how that first piece of evidence is invalid, and then when I explain how the gap proves it's worth the money to go and link back to my claim, that would be my commentary. So as you can see, I've used the Toolman model. I started with my claim up here in orange. I provided my data in purple, and then I've done the warrant or the link, the commentary piece, which is in green, and that's where I kind of develop my argument. So this is an example of, like I said, a counter argument paragraph for a synthesis prompt. And we'll move on to look at a rhetorical analysis and argument.